All right, so today is May 30th, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. So we can open it up to any questions. I think in the last meeting, you ended with the, was Daniel Everett and the Piraha, and you were saying that the Piraha don't commit suicide, and that kind of changed Daniel Everett's mind about Christianity and more into the Piraha's way of thinking. Just wanted to say, I think the reason why I took a note here, Piraha don't commit suicide. I think you talked about it before. Well, I think they don't have a concept of suicide, and with the Piraha, their ego boundary is not just the individual self; it's with the tribe, right? So if they commit suicide on themselves, it's like they're killing off the whole tribe. I mean, that's how I interpret it.
That's not quite my understanding. The thing to remember is that they will happily kill somebody else.
Oh, okay.
So, yeah, they're not averse to like killing somebody for getting, even revenge, I think. But they have a kind of a childlike, kind of a freedom, really, and they, in that they can't conceive, just like a kid can't conceive, because they're happy. They often called the happiest people on earth. And so you can't imagine a young kid really committing suicide unless in a very bleak situation like our culture puts them in. But in a normal village atmosphere or indigenous atmosphere, you can't conceive of them doing violence against themselves. So they thought it was funny because it's kind of like an own goal. It never occurred to them that you could do violence to yourself, because obviously you do violence to somebody else. And so the whole concept made them laugh. In a way, it's it's kind of a boomerang effect. It's kind of like, so I can't think just off the top of my head something where is equivalent for us that you couldn't ever imagine doing to yourself. It's something you do to somebody else. So, that the concept of killing somebody was there. It's what really blew their minds was that you would do it to yourself. It's like they just didn't compute. They never thought that was kind of possible. It's kind of like stepping on a rake and getting bashed in the eye or something. It was really funny.
It's almost like they're happy, like you said, they're happy with themselves. So if there's a problem, it's not themselves that's the cause of the problem. It could be the external, another person, and so it's okay to hurt or kill the other person, but not kill themselves because they're okay.
I would say that they live a very immediate life. So they live immediately in the present moment. And so if they killed somebody, they wouldn't do premeditated murder. Basically it would kind of be like there and then they would go like,
oh, I see, yeah.
So they, I think the best way to describe it is they're not dominated by the alien cortex. And I think that's the real lesson in all of that, is that the reason why Everett's stepmother commits suicide is because it's all alien cortex. The alien cortex is thinking and ruminating about its life. And I bet you before she committed suicide, she wasn't in any pain or anything like that. It was all emotional pain. And, people who commit suicide in our society, they feel the weight of the world on them. They feel that the taxman's after them. They got debts. Their wife's left them. You know, it's all like singing the blues, like the cowboy, you know, took my Chevy and the dog kind of thing. And all of that is in the alien cortex. And you see, the Puraha don't have the concept of, you know, the Chevy and the dog and the taxman and stuff. If, you know, if they're not immediately in pain or something, it's like, you know, what the hell? They don't ruminate about this stuff. One of the reasons why Everett couldn't convince them about Christianity is they asked him to stop talking about it. And the reason was because, you know, he kept on going on about Jesus. And eventually they asked him, like, who is this Jesus guy? And he said, oh, well, he lived thousands of years ago. And they said, well, wait a minute, you haven't met the guy? He says, well, in my heart and stuff. And I said, no, yeah, I mean, you can't walk up to the guy and say hello. You've never met him in real. And he said, no. Then they said, well, shut the fuck up. We don't want to hear about this bullshit. This is not a guy you know. It's just, what are you talking about? It's best. It's secondhand hearsay from never. It's like they said, don't talk to us about that. Talk to us about a guy you know. You know. You see, what they're saying is you're lying. You're not talking from the heart. You're making up stories about this guy you never know. It's kind of an insult to them. They say, like, we want to know about, you know, Fred and John, guys you've met. not some Jesus character which is vague and you only heard from hearsay. And so so the way to interpret it again is entirely alien cortex free. It's no overlay and it's no no lying. It's very direct and it's very honest. So they call us apagaishe, which means, or language apagaishe, which means like crooked head. And they call themselves, you know, their own language in relation to ours, straight head. And you can see, because the alien cortex is always lying. It's always substituting. It's always inverting. It's always scheming. And so, you know, they don't accept that because it would be a liability for them in their lifestyle. It doesn't serve you if you live in the Amazon, if you make long-term plans and stuff. Like, for example, catching fish for a week instead of just for today. You know, that wouldn't work in the Amazon. They don't have, well, they have fridges now, but they didn't have fridges and stuff like that. So, you know, what do you do with all the fish that you catch? It's, you know, it's going to attract insects and be a disease vector if you can't try and store it. So they're living in a kind of an Eden, but here's the thing. It's not that they unspoilt and then they just lucky because they're innocent. They worked hard, like Everett found, to get rid of the alien cortex. They knew damn well about the alien cortex. They knew damn well what traders and slavers and things would come and get. They had lots of experience, and they knew it was evil. And that's a common theme, is that a lot of the things were, there are no lost tribes that we don't know about. And, you know, like they have, like in the BBC or something, you know, lost tribe. It's all horseshit. There's nothing like that. There hasn't been for 100 years anything close to a lost tribe. But those guys that seem innocent and can't count and stuff, is when they tried to teach them how to count above 3, they found that there was active resistance. It wasn't that they were stupid or they were innocent. They actively resisted that. And it's like, and then, you know, the missionaries and all these other guys, they were amazed. They're like, how are you guys going to get anywhere if you won't listen to our lessons, you know, Portuguese missionaries and stuff. And you know, they didn't ever understand that if they did start behaving that way, their culture and their existence would fall apart. But the Piraha knew that very well, and the missionaries, and I mean, even up till Everett, didn't get it. It took Everett decades. It took Everett more than a decade, at least, to get the picture that they were actively resisting, and that was a good thing. But once you get onto that, you start, you know, then your world falls apart, because then you realize, hang on a minute, civilization and all the stuff that we've done that hasn't served us very well. We'd be much better off. Those guys are healthier, happier. They're living a much better life than we are. And so it's like, well, but we've been to the moon. It's like, yeah, what the hell good has it done us? We're going to wipe ourselves out. So Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems like it's a pattern. So you talked about the Piraha, and then just recently I listened to this podcast, Fall of Civilizations, and it's very, very good stuff about how civilizations fell. And one I found intriguing was the Rapa Nui people of Easter Island. So I think there's a contention. I think the common belief is that the island fell into ecological disaster, and then people did cannibalism and they wiped themselves out. But it actually, in that podcast, it talked about how there wasn't much violence at the time uh, until it wasn't until the Dutch came, Spanish, essentially Europeans came and kind of turned the world upside down. First through the smallpox and the disease vectors. Just the fact that, yeah, I guess the point was that if Europeans come to your place, they'll ruin you. It was just sad to hear.
Yeah. Well, you see, Easter Island is very contentious because a lot rides on it. You see, if Jared Diamond started all of this thing about Rapa Nui and Easter Island, because the first interpretation of it was the earliest Europeans saw it intact, and then later ones came and they were, it was really devastated. It was deforested. The population had declined to almost nothing. I think it's hard to tell. What's at stake is this kind of Hobbesian view. Is the heart of man really evil? So in other words, will humans destroy themselves if you put them on an island? It's basically William Golding's Lord of the Flies. So are humans destined to, like a plague, just take over an island and destroy it? And then other guys say, no, then you get all this new left-wing thing, which is, white men are evil, and, as soon as you touch a white man, you're going to die. I think, well, first of all, you've got to take a step back from it, because the guys are Polynesians, right? And if you look at the Polynesians, those guys are not saints. So one of the things that I think populated Easter Island is that the Polynesians were moving east across the Pacific. Now, one of the reasons why they moved from island to island, they migrated, was because of this damn thing, which I can never remember what it's called again, but it's basically, it's a poison on the reef. So it's a natural poison if you eat too much reef fish in an area where it bioaccumulates in fish. But it's actually a kind of a seaweed or no, algal bloom, I think. Yeah, it's called. Damn, it's always on the tip of my tongue. I can remember. It's just on the tip of my tongue. But anyway, that disease, which you still get now, sailors have to watch out, especially in the Pacific. So what would happen is the islands would get overrun by this damn thing that's on the tip of my tongue, and then they would have to move eastward. So they eventually got to Easter Island. Now, there are a couple of things to note. One of them is they had writing, so they're full on alien cortex. They were competitive, right? They would have these races to get to this island to, get eggs at a certain season. Whoever won that, would, their tribe and stuff would get ascendancy for a year and privileges for a year. So they were kind of competitive. And the other thing is, when you look at all the statues, the guys are they're patrilineal, right? They have families, and the families have statuses, and the Moai have headdresses, which you can see the rules that each one of the Moai is probably advertising as this is my ancestor, and the guys are in competition with the other whose ancestor is bigger than the other one. So you can see them in this kind of arms race. So
Yeah.
I think that it can't be the modern story where, oh no, it was all the one. there's another thing is that when the settlers who found it kind of deserted, they did eventually find some of the inhabitants drastically reduced, but they were hiding in caves, and they were cowering in the caves. So when the guys, came and coaxed them out, the guys were terrified because, basically they had serious wars and cannibalism and stuff. So it's, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if you can draw any serious lessons from East Island because the picture's too murky.
Yeah.
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 But I mean, if you look at the Maoris in Hawaii, or look at Polynesians, the Polynesians that went to New Zealand, the Maoris, they were bastards, real bastards. So there's a story where there were two branches. The Maoris, they kind of split. One group went to New Zealand, the other went to the Chatham Islands. Nobody knew about the ones in the Chatham Islands till about 1740, when a ship dropped by, and it found all these guys living on the Chatham Islands, and they were the exact opposite to the Maoris, although they were also cousins. They were living sustainably and very, very peacefully. They were matriarchy. They actually managed their population by castrating, all but a few of the boys, and so, but they didn't have any war. They didn't have any concept of war. So the ship that found them then pulls into Christchurch and says, there's these guys, thousands of them, all living peacefully on the Chatham Islands, just due east of here. When the Maoris heard that, they said, but hang on a minute, run that by me again. These guys have no weapons and they don't understand war. And they said, yeah, absolutely. And they said, holy shit, got in the longboats, headed there straight and slaughtered them. Because they said, they couldn't believe that there were a bunch of suckers that didn't go in for war. They thought, wow, we can take all their stuff, take their women. So the Maoris are not cool guys.
Yeah.
And by the time you get to Haiti and stuff, those guys are all cannibals down there, man. Those guys in puppets and stuff, they still just on the edge of cannibalism. So it's like, you got to be careful. I think the split is alien cortex. And so if you see the alien cortex somewhere, they're kind of doomed. Either it comes from the Europeans or it comes from the native ancestors. But all those guys, the Maoris and stuff, they have Neanderthal genes in them. So they have not a great percentage, but I keep on saying that the big bastards are the Aryans, and it seems to be because it's a maladapted hybrid of the worst traits of Cro-Magnons and Neanderthals. But the Polynesians also have Denisovan, Neanderthal, and Cro-Magnon. So they also have the alien cortex with this, hybridized virulent form. See, everybody in Africa also has an alien cortex, but it's not this kind of weird one, which is massively acquisitive, massively controlling, massively scared of death. Basically, Aryans.
Yeah.
So when those guys, when the modern left wing, woke crowd says, oh, it was because of colonialism, I think it's not helpful. I think they should say it's because of alien corticism.
Yeah, that's a good point, because I was starting to get skeptical because like you said, they did have the Rapa Nui did have a writing system. They said that they had competitions, and it was called the Birdman competitions, and they said,
that's right, Birdman, yeah.
Before
to get the eggs off this rock,
They claimed before the Europeans came that they only had these competitions, and they were nonviolent. And I was starting to think, well, I don't know. So, but you gave a different perspective.
It might be so, but
I mean,
the thing is, once you look at them and you see that they have longboats and they're doing writing and they have celestial navigation, the guys are making maps and shit like that. So once you say that, then you know that they've had contact with Sumeria. I don't buy this bullshit that civilization, started up in 9 different places, just, independently. It's like, it's complete horseshit. They must have contact. They're global sailors. So civilization starts, around Göbekli Tepe and Sumer. But what's been going around the world is trade. So the guys are learning to trade, and then basically they're learning to write. So the first use of writing in Sumeria is for contracts. It's basically an indelible witness. And the next thing it's used for is bureaucracy, in particularly tax recording. So the very first time they use it for literature, it's kind of a very, very novel use of, it's kind of like if you got QuickBooks and started writing music on it or something. People be like, wow, who knew you could get QuickBooks or a spreadsheet and make music out of it? So it's a real departure to try and tell stories. But once they got sophisticated enough with a bureaucratic language, then they could start writing stories. But anybody that's got writing, they didn't come up with that independently. There's no fucking way. I just think anthropologists don't know what the fuck they're talking about. And if you just look, anybody that's really interested in this, I encourage you to look at an animation of how civilizations start. And you can see with your freaking eye that basically it's going like a disease vector. So if apocalypse wasn't coming and we had infinite time, I would definitely do some computer modeling to prove that it would be that it is civilization is spreading like a disease vector. It cannot be starting independently in South America and then China. If you look at it start in Sumer, it spreads just like exactly like you can look at COVID spreading today. It spreads exactly that way. So it's inconceivable that it's happening independently. But you see, the reason why they say it's happening independently is, again, this kind of millenarian argument that they're trying to use for, the progressives are trying to use for Easter Island, is that civilization is inevitable, it's manifest destiny, civilization is good and it's an achievement that everybody will get to. And I say, no, it's a fucking disease and it's fucking spread from Sumer. So it's a political. The anthropologists have to ignore the obvious, that civilization is spreading like a disease. Well, it's trade, not civilization. It's trade, and trading places. The concept of having a trading place is what's spreading, and so they can't have that because it undermines Gordon Child and freaking Marx and surplus and all this bullshit story about civilization is good, and so they have to undermine it. Yeah, if it has a single point origin, it's terrible for left for the liberal left academia, because they have to say, shit, this comes from white people. You see, and then they say, well, we can't say that, all this good stuff just came from white people. And say, no, you can, because it's bad stuff. Just say, you get a complete clean bill of health from wokeism, because you say, it's civilization's evil, it came from white people. So there you are. Stop colonization means stop white people, stop civilization.
Yeah, it's like they coat the cancer with sugar so it goes down better.
And it only works if you start indoctrinating the kids early, right? It's kind of like Christianity. If you get all the kids before 7 and you start telling them how wonderful civilization is, they don't question it later, even given the evidence of their eyes. So eventually, kids are shooting up the schools and that, but they don't even make the connection why they're doing it, because civilization is evil and they know it. They know that the situation is intolerable, and they're fighting back against it. But some of those school shooters still will say, civilization's great. Well, if civilization's great, why are you shooting up the school? Because of the schools. It's like, no, school is an intimate part of civilization. Civilization would fall apart without early schooling.
Yeah, it's they have to deprive you of like, spiritual needs like your rite of passage, community, so that way you're like a little black hole that has to consume, yeah.
Yeah, what they call it socialization, but it's a complete abuse of the term, because socialization was done in a tribe. Socialization used to be tribalization. So they get all panicky now, saying, oh, all these kids have missed a year of school, and then they use this euphemism saying, oh, they're not being socialized. They're saying, like, well, yeah, that's a gift to them. They're not being indoctrinated is what's happening. They're not being pacified, and they're not being domesticated. And if that happens, the whole concentration camp collapses. Damn good thing if they kept them out of school.
Yeah, and also the workplace. I just realized in my workplace they had active shooter training, and they always bring in a sheriff every year to do some training, and they what did they say? Run, hide, fight is their motto.
It's
Yeah.
funny you bring that up because I had that at my workplace too. Active shooter
Oh,
training.
really?
Oh boy.
How
But
how to
Uh,
be an active shooter?
yeah, kind of.
no, no,
Police,
it's to
I know, it's the
prevent. Yeah,
opposite.
it's
It's
dumb.
kind of like harassment training is anti-harassment training. Our city, yeah, the police is always offering those sessions, but I never go.
But isn't it funny that all these people that are, transhumanists, futurists, and they, millenarians, they love progress, and they'll tell you, oh, if you live in a primitive lifestyle, in a tribal lifestyle, then it's full of like bears running out, it's dangerous and stuff, and you think like, really? I think the city is far more dangerous. I think a bear is much more predictable than a human being. so that again, it's inverted worldview. I don't think people like Native Americans. Yeah, I was just reading in like Bright Green Lies that in some of these areas, like in the Columbia River, up in the northwest, that if you canoed down when the first white settlers came to Washington, they if you canoed down the Columbia River, you would see a brown bear about every 15 minutes. So it's like inconceivable that grizzly bears are just ripping people's faces off left and right. But there were things like, if you see Lewis and Clark and look at their diaries, then they came along the Columbia River, and there were big grizzlies, much bigger than they are today, really scary ones. And they did chase them. They did chase the Lewis and Clark. But when you read it, you get the impression that they kind of dopes. They don't really know, understand a grizzly. I don't believe that the Native American people had trouble with grizzlies like Lewis and Clark did. They kind of have the wrong attitude, and they they're kind of like city folk, and they're messing with giant grizzlies.
Oh, that's funny you bring that up. I saw something earlier that was pretty great. So like, I think like predator animals like grizzlies will like test you and see if you're gonna like run. So this guy was like standing here. I was watching this YouTube video that like says like guy gets chased by grizzly. I'm like, okay, fuck it, I'll see this. And the grizzly charges him, but he runs at the grizzly screaming, and that grizzly bear turns around immediately and goes back to the woods. But the way that
Yes,
guy screamed was like a roar. So
yeah. So this is something we were taught in Africa. It's basically, in Africa, you don't assume that, even in the 30s and stuff, my dad and stuff was traveling all over Africa when it was really like they were headhunters and stuff. And they had lots of stories, but, very seldom that somebody like Livingston was attacked by a lion. If you read Jack London and Jocko the Bushveld and those things, he was attacked by a lion, but it's generally when they're on a horse. And so what we were always taught as kids is you must stand your ground if you're charged by almost any animal. And the reason is, if you turn and run, you'll trigger a fixed action response. So a cat is primed; they can't help it. If you know, whether they're hungry or whatever, if they see a running thing, they'll run it down because it's an innate fixed action response, and you've got to be very careful to trigger that. It's easy to do something that then, you know, the cat in particular will go, hang on a minute, this is a bit off script, I don't understand what this behavior is. They will back off because it's not anything that they understand. So if you bang a pot or something, it's like completely off its repertoire, and it goes like, shit, I'm not getting involved in this. And also, if you stand your ground, I mean, I know lots of people that were charged by lions and stuff, and they just stood their ground. My grand just stood her ground against a leopard and something, and just thing just took off. But yeah, it's just we're just so divorced from nature. It's I struggle. I mean, I tell you, I must admit that I'm taking awful strain with the, you know, just people and their psychology. It just was wearing me down at the moment. And I mean, one of the things was the talk to Kevin, and I just thought, you know, the things I take for granted, but I then realize later that really people don't know the basics. So, I mean, just the thing about the ocean and the fact that the ocean is fundamental. All life on Earth is built on the ocean. But, you know, here's a guy, doctor, well-educated, smart guy, and he doesn't fucking know that life on land could disappear in a heartbeat and nothing would happen. The sea would get better. But he doesn't know that, like, life on land is dependent on the sea. The sea's not a dumping ground, and then it's like I just thought everybody knew this, and the fact that people don't, it's just like, oh, we're screwed. We're so screwed. Yeah, what have they been teaching people in school?
I don't know. Do you think your education in South Africa was really? It seems like, you know, like, to use a term, you're like a Renaissance man. Like, you have classical training, but you're good with computers and engineering and math. So
But it was
maybe
a lack of education we got in Africa. That's the difference. The difference was there was a lack of education. So you see, we never had television, and that was a huge boon for education. So if you want to educate your kids, the first thing to do is get rid of all the screens. If you just chuck them all out. So there a few guys afloat that I know, families afloat, that were two families, one from Germany, one from Sweden in particular, I'm thinking of, and one from Canada. All three of them were educated. They were teachers, right? Some one parent, some both parent, but they were all educated, and they all had kids. And they did allow screens, but for like an hour a day. They really limited the screen time. And the kids reminded me of my childhood. They had a real childhood. But you can only learn stuff, you know, like physics and how the world works and stuff, by going out in nature and trying shit out. You've got to take on a bit of danger, you know. I mean, the shit I did as a kid, you know, lighting fires and making bombs and making guns, and just, it was a complete adventure with wild animals and shit all the time. We were just doing mischief all the time, and it was dangerous as fuck, you know, compared to how kids are brought up now. But we were very savvy. You know, I was about 1,000,000 times more savvy than kids today. You know, I mean, like my American kids. So it's education is really, really punishing kids, because they're not learning anything, right? What do you learn in school up until high school that you use? Nothing. Very, very little.
I saw this I think it was that Rand Prier, I linked that video months ago when he talked about the schooling system. He said they basically just teach you to juggle abstractions in a sterile room, and it's like, yeah, that's true. Yep, so it's basically worthless.
Well, they have a nefarious agenda. One of them is they're teaching you to sit still. They're teaching you to be obedient. They're putting you in streaming you into a hierarchy. They're encouraging the kids to haze each other. It's terrible, terrible child abuse. The school system is ritualized child abuse. But you can't tell that to an educator today. But those sailing guys, they were recalled to Sweden. The ones who both parents were educators. They were recalled to Sweden because Sweden has kind of a long arm on their citizens. It doesn't matter if you're abroad or something; they'll keep tabs on you. And so they made them come back to Sweden because they said basically they're abusing the kids because they're keeping the kids out of school. And so they said, no, we're teaching them here and stuff. And they said, well, you're not going to the curriculum. They're missing all these standardized tests and stuff. And so they have to come back. And so they said, okay, well, we'll bring them back and you test them and then you see. And so they tested them. They were really, they shut themselves because the kids were so far advanced. They were like 9 and 10-year-olds. They'd play with all these other kids that were French and German and English and stuff. And so they could speak 5 languages fluently. And they're doing mathematics, they knew sailing, they could navigate, they had read all these books and stuff. And they were flawed. They were like, these kids are like university educated 10-year-olds. And say, that's what you get if you just take them out of the system. But the guys were furious because it showed up the system. So the Canadian woman, she had a kid with Down syndrome. And so in Canada, they asked her to start lecturing and tell her how she made her kid so advanced. They told her that her kid who had Down syndrome would never pass the mental age of a 5-year-old. And so then she, said, well, screw this. She's not keeping them in a home. She's going to take the kid to sea and have a life. And so, the kid just played with all the other kids, 10-year-olds and stuff. And, all the other kids just accepted her with Down syndrome. They didn't treat her any, specially or anything like that. They looked after if she got into trouble. But when she got back to Canada, they said, this is incredible. She said, basically, they've never seen a kid with Down syndrome so advanced. And so she said, well, yeah, it's all I did was not keep her in a home and give her special needs, care. You just let them run around on the yacht and on the beach, with the other kids and just tag along with whatever they were doing. You see, a kid with Down syndrome, if you're teaching the others maths or something, then they'll try and fit in. They'll try and get a pencil and try and write and stuff. So it's like, it's so bad what we're doing to kids. It's just so fucking bad. And then they're starting to shoot the schools up, and no one says, questions the system that they're shooting up. It's like, guys, you stop talking about disarming people and stuff. Stop that shit. You got to question why we're sending kids to school. If they're shooting the school up, saying, what do we think we're doing? I mean, if you put like tigers in a cage or something, and they started tearing, zookeepers apart or something, somebody's got to sit down and say, maybe we shouldn't be keeping them in a cage. But it's like, no one says that. It's like, you've got to stop this bullshit and say we need to abolish schools. The schools are the problem. It's not the guns. It's not the kids. It's nothing. It's the school. So it's terrible, man. We just got to liberate these kids somehow.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement. Having experienced U.S. schooling system and seeing, the decay today and how bad it's getting. Yeah, I wish society would go sane, but I don't see it getting there, unfortunately. Yeah.
Yeah, there's too much regimentation. And I didn't grow up here, but I hear stories from friends about how high school was really, really hard for them because, just a lot of the bullying and, yeah, that's, I guess, I don't know. I grew up elsewhere and we did have regimentation too, but we had strong family connections, so it was an extended family setting. Whereas my American cousins who grew up here, they were called latchkey kids. So they lived in the suburbs. They would come home, they'll be by themselves. And when they come home, they would just turn on the TV until the parents came home at night to cook supper. So I don't, maybe they played with other kids, but it was more like regimented sports too, like baseball or soccer. So they didn't really have pickup games where children, like where I grew up, you just go out in the street and you play with whomever you meet.
Yeah, yeah, we used to just play with anybody, and we weren't supervised all the time. And I noticed with my kids was kids are not, they have an adult looking over them. They're chaperoned 24 hours a day until they're like 18, and it's like we never had that. If we got into trouble, we'd have to run and find an adult. It wouldn't be easy. Most of the shit we had to handle ourselves. You know what I mean? And we did. It's like I remember I was like 7. My sister was 9. We were making toffee in the oven, but it was a gas oven. We forgot to light the oven. So when we finally realized, oh shit, we switched the oven on but forgot to light it. We went and lit the oven. And I just had this mental picture of my sister being blown completely across the kitchen. And she was completely black. All her hair was burnt off.
Oh my.
And we didn't even think of calling an adult. I just handled it. We went and I, dressed all her wounds and bathed them and everything.
Oh my gosh.
We didn't think that it was necessary to call an adult. But can you imagine that now? It's like basically they'd call 911 and she'd be in hospital. But it's unnecessary. It's entirely unnecessary. Yeah, but that's one of the things is people go with this because they don't want risk, and then they're also going off this paradigm that they're going to miss out. Basically they'll fall behind in the race. The kids, they look at all the statistics and kids' earnings. If they don't have a degree, they'll be screwed and stuff. And so it's like it doesn't. It has this century since 2000. The evidence has been the opposite. Is you're better off with doing something you like, reducing stress, and not having a degree. But nobody will communicate that. Although the researchers know that, they won't communicate it because it just goes so counter to our culture.
Yeah,
I did all evidence.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay, yeah. So I was gonna say that I did the math on this years ago about the economy and the rat race and all that shit, and I'm like, no, I don't think I'm gonna have retirement. The mortgages are expensive. Fuck this. I'm gonna do art.
Yeah, and you see, if you can reduce your stress, that's the most important thing. But it's so bad where we've got to. The reason why all the kids are hazing each other and bullying and stuff is because it's a prison yard. It's the school system I went through was a prison yard, and it's terrible that we've made a system where we incarcerate kids against their will. And it's so unnecessary because, like in Germany, they still believe in having kids having a childhood. So kids don't do pre-K or anything. They just basically till the age of 7, they just run around being kids, playing in the park and stuff like that. And they don't teach them reading or writing or anything. In the UK, it's getting earlier and earlier. They're doing pre-K now. It's like 4-year-olds, 3-year-olds are learning to count and read and stuff because everybody's terrified they'll fall behind. But the amazing thing is that the German kids don't start doing anything that a 3 or 4-year-old English kid does until they're 7 or 8. When they're 8 years old, they catch up instantly. So and even here's the real kicker. is that they exceed them. They quickly exceed them. So they just play around until 7, and then until they're 7 years old. Then they stop the curriculum that they start in the UK at like 3. And within a few years, they overtake them. So it's like, even though educators have all this information at their fingertips, they can't go against the society. They can't go against this cult belief that we have.
Yeah, it's just a messed up thing. Like, especially in America, I feel like people have completely forgotten the value of play. Like, why people need to understand, like, why are little kids playing? Well, we're supposed to be hunter-gatherers, so they're supposed to figure out what food they're supposed to be eating or looking at, playing in the grass, checking out the environment and all that. Yeah, you're supposed to be building up that mental map. But instead, it's like, no, we're gonna fill that mental map full of things that they're not gonna be able to use, and no wonder things are going to shit.
Yeah, my theory on education is you can't actually teach somebody something until they have a question. So the art of pedagogy is to try and make people have a question. And so if you have kids, you just have to try and set up a situation where they've got to say, that's weird, and then ask a question. And as soon as they ask a question, it demands another one and another one. That's how education happens. But this idea that you just open the lid on people's scalp and fill it full of concrete like they have in our education system is just so wrong. All the evidence is against it. Until somebody actually has a question, you can't actually learn anything. And now they teach kids not to have questions. They actually punish kids for questioning. So in my school, I was, we were roundly punished for questioning and asking too much, but it didn't stop us because we were like really rebellious against the system. And so, we used to take the teachers to task asking questions, trying to embarrass them. But they don't do that anymore. I think in university now there's an entente cordiale where the lecturers don't give the students any trouble, and in exchange the students don't give the lecturers any trouble, and then they both just give each other a passing grade and then just carry on. So it's got to the stage where the Soviet Union got to. It's the educational equivalent of we pretend to work and they pretend to pay us. It's kind of like where academia is now, I think. But sad. So anyway, I wanted to say something about to change the topic. Has anybody got any more to say on this topic?
Oh, I think we've nailed it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, the trick is now is just, get people to question the school system, and so we can throw it out someday, hopefully.
Yeah. Cultural change. But so it would help if at least somebody somewhere thought differently. But so so I was thinking of that Stephen Fry and Jordan Peterson conversation that they had. And there was something that Stephen Fry mentioned, which I was really interested in, because I remember the experiment he was talking about. He was talking about something which he credited to Skinner, but I didn't think it was Skinner. And I went looking for it to try and find who did the experiment, and I couldn't find it anywhere. So if anybody knows who it is or can track it down, I really want to know. It's basically the one where he was talking about this experiment they did with rats. They put a glass, they basically get a raft made of perspex, and they floated on water. And all the rats keep stabilized because they just go around randomly, and if they're all jiggling around randomly, they don't tip the raft over, even though they can see they're imperiled over the water. Now, when they scale that up and put people on it, people don't last long. They go straight in the water very quickly. And the reason is because people realize that they're in peril, and they all start running around, and they start overcompensating. They all start running to this side and then realize they've overcooked it and run to the other side. And so people being aware of their situation. The rats aren't really aware of their peril, so they just run around normally. But what the experiment's designed to show is being aware of the peril is actually really, really bad for your chances, because it means you overcompensate. And so Stephen Fry was making the same argument that I was making with the helicopter, saying, we've got to learn to let go, because all these systems work. And what we're doing with everything on a planet-wide scale, and soon we're going to start geoengineering, but all these transhumanists that are trying to micromanage us, and it still goes into the school system, and this regimentation, is trying to get control and trying to manage it, just like the pandemic. And that's what Stephen Fry was talking about, was the pandemic, is that if you try and do that, you're going to screw it up, because it's a complex system. And you can't, as we were talking about in the other day, you can't manage a complex system with a simple little thing like an alien cortex. And so all the evils in the world is trying to keep control of complexity. And so, and then you get in these cycles. Oh, Boris Johnson totally screwed it up, because he mismanaged the whole thing. It's like, guys, there isn't a way to manage it. And the guys cannot not manage it. Because as soon as somebody in power says, like, okay, best thing of all, should just let it run its course, people will howl. They say, like, well, you've broken the social contract. You're supposed to keep us safe. They say, Boris Johnson should say, I'm keeping you safe. It's a complex system. Basically, the safest thing to do is not fuck with it. But people wouldn't accept it. So people demand that these guys start controlling it. It inevitably goes south. And then they start scapegoating the guys. And so nobody has the option to do nothing. So if they wanted to teach kids something in schools, they should teach this have them let go and teach them the value of being hands off. But they don't. They teach them, we're going to get control, and everything. The underlying sort of message that comes across from science and all these STEM subjects is this thing from like Hilbert, ignoramus, that quote, we can know, we must know. We will know. Ignoramibus, ignoramus. No, ignoramus, ignoramibus. Yeah, so that's the message that we're reinforcing in these kids. And then you come to, today, where you look on Reddit and you see Futurology has like 15, almost 16 million subscribers. As they like, and then you see Collapse as like, like a fraction of that. But you can see why, is because they've told the kids that, this is our narrative, is we're conquering nature, we're getting control, we are supreme. And so this human supremacy narrative, even though everything says it's not working, everything says, if you look at all the great triumphs of all, look how aid worked out in Africa. They cite the devastation in Africa to all the aid and United Nations programs that were designed to lift people out of poverty and to stop the advance of the Sahel and all of that kind of thing. And all of those now are cited as the advance of the Sahara. It was the exact opposite happened. But nobody says anything. All that shit that happened when I was a kid, of all that we were told, they're going to transform Africa, get control of the Sahara, it'll all feed everybody, and it's like the opposite happened, and they cite the aid programs of that era. But they don't teach it to kids. The Green Revolution, they teach them the Green Revolution and stuff. They don't tell them the effect of the Green Revolution has been an unmitigated disaster. If you see the effect of the Green Revolution in the Punjab, those guys are militant, and they want reparations for that. But nobody says anything. We go on to the next, EcoHealth and United Nations and WEF. They're still on the same shit that has proven to not work time and time again. And they don't teach this to the kids. They're still teaching the kids all this carry, sherry, Green New Deal shit. And they don't, say like, you guys, you got to stop this shit, man. Nobody teaches that.
Yeah, I feel like the whole I think it's the agriculture system is like Herbert Bosch process and Green Revolution. I feel like that was just civilization knuckling down, because they were coming to the limits of agriculture and they scienced up agriculture to do that. And I feel like that was just like civilization knuckling down. Oh, we can make this work. And it's like, no, we should have pulled our heads out of our asses back then.
Yeah, in fact, the Haber-Bosch process is actually geoengineering. It's basically nitrogenizing the soil is geoengineering. You don't want to say that too loud because we're about to enter a phase of massive, massive geoengineering. And it's going to be the end of us, because you can say it with certainty because you can look at the previous ecological disasters and any kind of planetary large-scale thing that goes management. You know that it's going to be a disaster. I mean, there hasn't been. I want to see anything you can show me that has lasted for over 100 years and has been managed and hasn't turned out to be a disaster. And I can't think of anything of any decent scale or even a micro scale. Even if you said, oh, your grandma's garden has been managed for 100 years and that's fine. But no, it's been denuding somebody. She's getting the fertilizer from somewhere. She's using pesticides. She's doing, basically, that if she's managing it, she's taking, entropy from somewhere else to keep her little patch ordered. And saying, well, it's basically keeping order is counterproductive in a complex system. So it's provable. So I have no doubt that this geoengineering is going to be a disaster. But here we go on a vast scale of doing this geoengineering, and why it's dangerous is why it's dangerous to mention something like the Haber-Bosch process is geoengineering, because a lot of these weasels, like David Keith, who should be shot as soon as possible, is they're saying, well, we've been doing geoengineering. Climate change is geoengineering. We've been geoengineering for 5,000 years, so it's fine. It's like, listen to yourself. We're doing geoengineering to fix the cock-ups of all this geoengineering. So we've got to stop moving Earth, and we've got to stop mining water, and we've got to stop constructing. And but these guys are going to double down on it now. Like the Haber-Bosch process, they're going to double down. And so the massive geoengineering projects are coming. And they're frankly insane because, just read Dark Green Lies. I mean, Bright Green Lies. Dark Green Lies, there's a Freudian slip. But it's going to be dark. It's going to be desperately dark. And if you read that, it's sort of stuff which no one wants to face. Things like, wind farms actually increase the local temperature. So it's like, whoever says that, it's like, it's not all about desert tortoises and Joshua trees. I mean, the cure that we're trying to do for all the ills that the alien cortex has done is to just double down on the alien cortex. And you say, well, when are people going to lose hope? When are they going to stop this dysfunctional behavior? And it's when they really get hurt. And even then, they're not going to let go.
Yeah, it's like even when an alcoholic, hits rock bottom, they can still die from their addiction. So yeah, it's not very good. Yeah, I don't have a very good view of what's coming next, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, this was another thing which was depressing me after that conversation with Kevin in the ocean. Is I think there's especially on the environmentalist side, is this quaint notion that if we just leave everything alone, it'll come back. And that also I thought people didn't. I was disappointed that people didn't know that that is true up to a point, but there's a tipping point where it doesn't come back. So now, if I look in the seas and stuff now, have come back tremendously. Just this afternoon, I saw these two mother big fish under the boat, and it was like, wow, that's all come in a year. So then, you know, a lot of Greens are thinking, you know, oh, you know, just, you know, and anarcho-primitivists and stuff thinking we just need to stop and everything will come back, and say we're at the brink, right? So the oceans do not just come back. If it depends on how hot they are, the pH, and there's lag. There's 10 years of lag. So you will see that, you know, the temperature goes up, and a lot of these species will all be female. They'll die off, every last one. It's not like, oh, there'll be some niche where there's no. You can get to the point, and it's normally in this kind of web, is 50%. But if the pH changes and the temperature goes up together, could be it for all life in the sea. It's not going to come back. Fish are not going to come back. They will go. There are a lot of them. You know, it's basically, if you look at how sensitive the whole thing is, it seems robust because it's robust because it's dynamically stable up to a point. It's just like a boat. You know, if you rock a boat, it looks like it's really stable. You can, you know, if you're really naive, you can, you know, get a boat to heel over, and you can say like, look, it's really stable. Look at it going back, and say like, watch this. Take it to this point. At some point, it goes, and then it's very tipping on which way it's going to tip. And if it tips this way, it's stable in the other direction, upside down. And so that's where the planet is. We're at the tipping point. And all these people saying, yeah, but it's all tipped before, and it's all robust. And it's like, no, we're absolutely on the tip. In fact, I think we passed the tip in 2020. I think we're doomed.
Yeah, not only that, but people also consider like what's going on with the civilization. The damage it's doing is akin to the meteor from the dinosaurs and like the Great Dying, and that shit took like 30 million years to even start recovering the biodiversity. So I wish people would realize that we've done tens of millions of years of damage to the biodiversity of the planet, and it's like not even clear if there's going to be any complex life after we're through with it.
Yeah, I think a lot of environments are way too sanguine. There's like Venus was an Earth-like planet, right? And it sterilized itself, boiled off its ocean just because of CO2. So I have no time for these guys that say, oh, but if you go back in history, there were worse times and stuff. Like, no, there's more CO2 in the air now than for the last 40 million years. So it's like, don't come with this bullshit. And anyway, it's not CO2 that gets us, it's methane. And so we've never had a period where the methane runs away. So all these models and that all squiffy because they all have, you know, all the plants come in to take advantage of the CO2 and say, no, that isn't what happens when you do it really fast. It's like, the models are like, you know, modeling saying, you know, I can shoot you once a year and you'll easily last 5 years because you can recover from each bullet wound. But if I shoot you 5 times one morning, you're doomed. And that's, you see, all the models are all long, stretched out things, and then they're finding time and time again that they don't work like this. So all the tundra was supposed to get green. As the Arctic melted, the tundra was supposed to green. And all the foliage comes out, and then that would counterbalance it. And they're finding out, no, the thermokarst means it's just dark. It's concrete. when the thing melts, there's no vegetation. It's like it's like an asphalt runway. So then, you know, each one of these things, they check off all their delusions, and you say, like, guys, you can see what's happening. So
Yeah,
I think
exactly. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
but I think we would have to react right now. We would have to stop industrial civilization, like, you know, right now. It's basically have stop everything, and just everybody just, you know, all electricity and stuff should be brought down, and you know, stop transporting fossil fuels and stuff, and then, you know, that's what I think it would take. These ideas, oh, we can be net neutral by 2030, 2050 is like, we're done for.
It's like
But anyway,
when we talked to Jerry Jensen that one time, we were talking about how people are just going to rationalize what they want to do anyway, and this whole bright green bullshit they're doing with, oh, we can get net zero while running industrial civilization. It's just that, you know, rationalizing what they want to do anyway, even if it's obviously bullshit, which is really depressing.
yeah, so the only thing I can think of to do is to try and, you know, just talk a bit of sense, like, and, you know, put it on YouTube so like 10 people see. But yeah, the forces are a bit too big, and there are many people that are working to change things. I mean, proper things. And I think, I mean, I have people in mind like Jeff Hull and those kind of guys. That kind of what singles those guys out is they've got a lot of apparently a lot of psychological processing under their belt, and so for most people it takes a long time for you to figure this stuff out. And so for most people, I think that they haven't realized, you know, they're still on the baby steps thinking, oh, well, it's a technical problem. We can use an engineering fix. You've got to get through that. That might take you 10 years. A lot of people don't get through that in their lifetime. But eventually you get to a point where you say that this is a psychological problem. This is exactly like an alcoholic. And then, you know, you start from there, and, you know, you might take you 3 decades to figure that out. And then you've got to start working on the problem. So there are a few people that realize what the problem is and realize that it's psychology, but precious few people know how to change it. And, you know, I think you know, we're on the right track with an ARG, an alternate reality game, and saying you can't reason with people, but you have to start a game and start making it fun to, you know, to change. And then that could spread, and could actually go viral. These things do go viral quite fast. I mean, QAnon, I saw that they're really recognized as big as a major religion. That only took 2 years. So you know, it's possible to do these kind of things. But, you know, I really struggle to get people to, at this stage, I really struggle to get people to even hear anything against science or against technology or futurology. And that's just the basics. Even stuff against the internet or the grid, or just talking against it, let alone, you know, basically getting to the stage where people need to get militant against these things.
Yeah,
So
I think. Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, sorry.
I was gonna say, I think the main problem with this is, like, you know, experience, personal experience. Most people haven't probably thought about the grid and science and all of that in a different way, and B, probably haven't really at least been conscious of negative experiences and to their health from it. So I think it's I hate this word, but it's an awareness issue. I think a cognitive awareness issue of seeing the negatives of these things.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
like I was saying, is like people are going to react when they get hurt.
right. I think yes, it's awareness, but I think more importantly is they've got to see these things go down, like the grid. They got to see things actually collapsing or actually hurting them. That, I mean, you're on the right track here, and it's tough because there's a lot of this nonviolence, and it's tough. It's a tough position.
Yeah, non-violence is an expensive luxury at this stage.
I
Yeah.
think it's also brainwashing, distractions. People are just going round and round and round the merry-go-round or the Ferris wheel, and they're not really analyzing how our current lifestyles, like we all know, are very stressful, and they think that, okay, let's double down. Like, I will work harder, I will work faster, I will use all the technological tools, and then then I'll be better if I do that. It's not stopping to think, what are we doing this all for?
Yeah.
I remember one of your videos. This was brilliant. I think this is like the crux of this issue. So you're talking about in terms of like system science and like the hierarchy, how what they do is like as you get up in the hierarchy, you have more options, you know? So they like for us slaves, they put us through schooling. They basically put blinders on us of like what they've done, they've taken away from us, and what we're allowed to think, what we're allowed to question. But as you get up, you have more options to maneuver. You know what I'm saying? I can't remember which of your videos it was, but yeah, I think that's the
Yeah.
main thing. They put freaking mule blinders on you when you're like in the schooling system. You can't see shit.
Yeah. Yeah. That's been my experience through life. Is you're better off getting higher up in the hierarchy, then you can do more damage against it. So I've always tried to rise up the hierarchy so you can really sabotage it. But yeah, yeah. I mean, I have no status in this hierarchy. So I but I yeah, I wonder. I keep on. Yeah, see, there are guys out there that um, you know do have status in the hierarchy, and at some stage they're going to realize that we need to make a change. And then I feel that I feel personally they have a lot to offer in actually doing change, because because I see it in terms of alternate reality gaming and a cult. So I think that's personally that's something I feel comfortable about, knowing how cults run and how to do them. Um, but I'm feeling a little bit at the moment that it's kind of one of those stopping points where there's no movement, and then you just in those times, like in the I Ching, says you just have to prepare. So it's basically so when there's no movement, nothing works unless you have good timing. You can't really force any of these things. You just have to take the opportunity. But at times, slow times, which I think we're going into another one now, especially because we're coming out of COVID. In their minds, even though I don't think we are, we have like a summer where everybody has a false sense of hope, and then by the winter, reality will bite, is what I predict. So, and also the financial situation and stuff. So I think that what you're supposed to do in these times, according to all the wisdom everywhere, is prepare. So at these times, you got to get ready for when these things turn around. Then you've got to react. But I feel that it's one of those stages where we're on the back step of the dance. So if you look at like guys like Roger Hallam and stuff, they just went through burning pink, and then Valerie didn't really shape in the mayoral elections in London, which was what they were hoping for. But I can't see anything from Roger anymore. There's no videos. It's gone very, very quiet. And so I'm thinking he must be feeling pretty down. I don't imagine he's tooling away somewhere.
Yeah,
But
I feel Roger's pain.
yeah,
It's very
I do
lonely.
too.
It's very
Yeah,
freaking lonely.
I do too. I can feel that pain. And
Have you had any luck connecting with him? Because I heard that, well, you were wanting to connect with him.
Yeah, yeah.
Have his people responded to you, or?
Not to me, to Gary. Yeah, but
Oh, okay, yeah,
Gary's trying to organize something. Yeah, and
that's
so
good to hear.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, but I feel it's perfect timing because it would be nice to talk to him when he's feeling completely on the ropes. Because you see, it's a good time when everybody's despondent, because then they can hear. They're not very good at listening when they're having success, and so you can't tell them, oh, the success is not going to last or something like that, like Extinction Rebellion. Very easy to see where they're going to wind up, but they're not going to listen because they're too drunk on success. But at a point like this, it is one of those inflection points where you could influence people. It's one of those neutral points where everybody's kind of defeated for a little bit, and then activists and stuff, and then you have an option to actually get some change, because, or set a new direction, because they can hear you when they're down. And so, yeah. But I mean, I think even Derek Jensen and Leah Keith and those guys, they must be feeling pretty down. I mean, we're going to talk to Derek Jensen, I think, next Thursday, right? Oh, no, next Tuesday.
Oh yeah, Tuesday, June 1st.
Yeah. But I got a feeling he's going to be pretty down, because that AMA that they did on Reddit, that was just brutal. They just did a hit job on him, on all three of them. But basically because of transgender issues and stuff like that. So but it was a hit job, pretty much like happened to Roger Hallam with Desire. It's just so obviously the establishment targeting him. So I don't think it was just woke kids and stuff. It might have been the detractors just went and got him, but I can almost smell the state operators. It's
Yeah, that's how it looked to me. That's how it kind of looked to me. It might have been, like a baby psyop to drag their names through the mud. Yeah.
Yeah. I definitely got the feeling it was pushback against the message of the book, because it's like the book is so powerful, and the movie too, and then they've got to come back with some woke nonsense. It's like completely irrelevant, but it triggers everybody, and it's wow. That stuff is. If it's not a planned psyops, we've got to the stage where the kids are doing psyops on themselves. They've been so well trained. They've been trained to, it could be possible, because if you get people like in North Korea, and which is just a cult, right? You can get them to bamboozle themselves. You can train them to indoctrinate themselves. The cult has a very easy time after that, because people know how to self-train. If you look at Scientologists and that, they self-indoctrinate, and they self-program, and so you can teach people to self-program. But one of the key things to teaching people to self-program is to keep everything positive. If ever you come on a thing where everybody has to be positive, has to be, negativity is really punished. There's a lot of social penalty for being down and not being enthusiastic with the program, or optimistic. That's generally a key that there's a cult or some kind of ruling ideology that comes from a centralized point. And the reason they do it, I mean, the reason it happens in a cult is that the cult leader, if they're doing anything nefarious, it's very easy not to get scrutiny if nobody's allowed to say anything negative. So if you're doing, just saying like, oh, I think the cult leader's a pedophile, then you're like, oh, that's very negative. You can't even begin to basically start undermining him.
Oh, what you're saying here, like, reminds me of, like, most of the people I know in my life, you know, they're always like, that's not happy. That should be happy. You know, it's like it's pop culture. Like what you're describing there is, you know, it's a cult of pop culture. Yeah. To like all cults are the same and all that. But yeah, like that's the attitude of most people I know. When I say something critical, it's like, why are you being so negative? It's like that I'm not trying to be negative, but
Yeah, it's keep it light, keep it happy, keep it positive. Why?
yeah.
So that nobody can focus on the negative, and then basically the guys pulling all this evil can get away with it because you're not allowed to be negative. You can't you can't point out what they're doing.
And
It's
then it's like
perfect.
that a Sid Smith video where he talks about the bunnies and the bunny gets up and is like telling, "Okay, guys, we got to stop destroying. Oh, eat him!"
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, you can talk about all of this, you know, till the cows come home. But at some stage, yeah, I'm hoping we'll get traction. But anyway, it's really slow going, isn't it?
Right. And sometimes you, well, you post those things with hashtags that says it's time or it's too late or something like that. But it's good to hear that you're kind of sanguine about that it's not too late to do the psychological um, or changes via an ARG. Eh, when you cited that QAnon went viral quickly, because I'm just thinking, do we have time? Do we still have time to change the psychological aspects or thinking of people?
No, we don't have time. I don't think we do. I mean, we don't have time to like save civilization or stop a mass die-off or stop a whole load of pain or save much of Earth's ecology. We haven't got any time for the kind of Ken Wilber transformation and into this kind of transhumanistic, not transhumanist, uh, uh, transcendent kind of paradise. And so we've blown it for that. We're in deep shit. We're in for real punishment. I don't see we can avoid that. But yeah, but the thing you see in my philosophy, this even if you're going to die tomorrow, even if you're facing the firing squad tomorrow, the psychology still works today, and it's more than just, you know, even if knew I was going to die tomorrow, I'd plant a tree today. You need preparation for death. So since we all know we're going to die, it's the only certainty. It's like the Buddhists, you know, they call it a bardo, like a transition. And everybody is in transition. What's unavoidable in our world today is no one can avoid the coming transition. What's at stake is what kind of transition it is. So I do sympathize with people like Derek Jensen and stuff with the transsexuals, because it's one of the things that people are saying. Everybody knows there's a transition coming. Our alien cortexes, our collective alien cortexes, know that there's a vast transition coming. It's kind of like birth pains, right? So everybody can feel the birth pangs, and they know that there's this dramatic event coming. But then they decide, well, you know, I can see my ego is going to die and I'm transforming to a new one. And then some narratives say, well, yeah, it's because you're gender dysphoric. So then you can transition to being the opposite sex and be the correct you. And so that's a substitution for what I think the transformation is. I think the transformation is psychological. It's basically a transformation out of ego. So it's ego death. It's the death of the alien cortex, or the transformation of the alien cortex. But most people are thinking in terms of it's an external transformation. It's transformation of the social systems. So then you get people in Extinction Rebellion that are thinking more in terms of a transition that's, you know, a transition to social climate justice and regenerative society. So they think of it as societal transformation. Then you get all the transhumanists and that, and they think it's a transition to post-human. And then it's all machines and order and stuff like that. And so everybody knows that there's a transition. Then Klaus Schwab and all those guys, they are the ones that are going to really dictate the transition because they've got all the power. And so they're thinking in terms of a transition that's eugenics. So that they are, Bill Gates and those guys are unapologetically eugenicists. So I posted that thing with Epstein-Gates relationship. And Epstein is a eugenicist. He's just like Lindbergh. And Lindbergh wanted to do exactly what Epstein wanted to do, and that's have baby farms. So these guys are, I think Bill Gates is exactly the same. I think there's a lot of dirt that Epstein must have on Bill Gates. But if you look at Bill Gates and all his program, it's a eugenics program. They despise the hoi polloi, an average person. And in their models, humans are surplus to requirements. The average humans are surplus to requirements. So Bill Gates says he's going to eliminate poverty. Sure he is. He's going to do it by doing things like impact tokens, by regimenting people, by managing them digitally. So he basically, you know, if you, I'm sure if you talk to Bill Gates, after a few drinks or something, on neutral ground, on safe ground, he would tell you that, the people are poor because they don't have good life skills, they don't have good habits, they're lazy, and so they need to be managed. They need to be managed like you would manage a cow or a pet. And so people need to be trained. People need thinking done for them. But people are not suited for the alien cortex as well. And so he will start off doing all this kind of regimented control. But people will not be managed that way. What these guys don't understand is people want to be free and they want to be natural. They don't want to be controlled and regimented. And so they start to resist. And the easiest form of resistance is malfeasance. So it's not malfeasance, it's malingering. So, just like in the Soviet Union, people start to work less, they start to work against the system just because they're obstructive. And so where you'll get to with Bill Gates type programs and Klaus Schwab, EcoHealth, and the One Health, all of those kind of things, is where you will get to with them is they will lose hope in even less hope in the hoi polloi, and eventually the hoi polloi will look increasingly like a surplus problem, and that's when you get the nasty stuff that like the Germans got to. So if you trace all this, if you just get all the bullshit they teach you about Hitler in school and go and say, like, I've never heard about Hitler, let's start afresh and try and understand what happened in Germany, you will see this progression. So the first thing you've got to get out of your head is that it was a death program. It was a labor program. And you see that Bill Gates and these transhumanists that are trying to do digital social control, they and e-monitoring and e-surveillance and all those nudges and stuff like that, all of those coercive programs, right? They are really a labor program. They're trying to get people to conform, and they're trying to get people to work so they work their way out of poverty. Now, that's how it starts. When things go wrong, right, they don't start out saying, we're going to wipe out the poor. But they will get there, because once the poor are micromanaged to the finest detail of their lives, then when they still cannot get them to cooperate, basically things just will get worse on them. They'll get more, instead of getting more and more, it gets more like the Uyghurs and stuff, and then they get more and more entropy instead of more and more ordered. So in trying to force people, coerce them into being good kids like Bill Gates wants them to be, there'll be more and more of a burden on the system. And at some stage, when the system actually gets in trouble itself with something like food, then they stop with the idea that the work program, the work program is still there. Basically in Germany, they worked people, especially on the V weapons and all their magic weapons, they worked them, just ground them till they dropped. They just worked them till they dropped. But where the mass killings and stuff come in is because they can't feed them. And so when you get to the stage where Bill Gates has got all this farmland and he's thinking it's all farmed scientifically and it's all mechanized and everything's done with AI, those systems will break down. And when those break down, then they will start on the genocide. So, but, and this might take years to happen, because if they're talking about total systems management, in other words, even managing the climate and geoengineering, I'm warning people that they can string it out a long time. The result is getting worse. It's kind of, they're running a deficit on the results in the future. But they can run up a very big deficit. If you just look at how much, the fiat system in finance is a good example. Since 1971, it's been running in a disaster. But you see, they're still kind of treading water. They're still just pedaling in the air over the canyon with the finances. And look how long they've done it. They've done it now for 50 years. So they can really string it out. Now imagine the same kind of management done in terms of, say, climate, or ecological management. So it gets more and more dystopian, more and more hellish, but the end result is more and more catastrophic. But you have to give them credit for being able to stretch out the agony. And so that's, I think, what we headed for with the WEF and the United Nations and all these, basically New World Order. You're not allowed to say the New World Order because then it's a conspiracy theory. But guys, this has been going on for a very long time. The New World Order and the deep state exists. I'm sorry, but liberals just have to get over their shit. It's just basically they yeah.
But in all this bleakness, what then can we do except to prepare ourselves to accept that it will happen?
Well, no. So my idea of the stance to take in it is it's hugely romantic. I mean, if you've only got one life to live, it's better than sitting in a cubicle is resisting. So, it's as a movie plot, it's a really, really good one. And I think that we win because we have the better narrative. See, one of the things that they really struggle with, the transhumanists, is they Vogons, they have no imagination. And although everybody is futurologists, they, all they're really thinking of is, when do I get my flying car? And, when do you cure cancer? But it's like, so you've got your flying car and you've got cancer cured, now what? There's no romance in it. And that's a very big flaw for them. So Charles Schwab and that kind of thing it's only inspiring if you're Asperg and you just complete autist, you're on the autistic spectrum, and you're looking at the world and you think, yeah, I want to get involved in solving these problems. But there's no romance in it. It's not very imaginative. If we take the view that we're team human and we need to stop, undermine, just do anything we can, you can start a secret society, you can start cults, and you can do, I mean, like, who's having more fun? The guys at at Davos or the guys storming the Capitol?
Yeah, you can create a way better story than the transhumanists, like, Team Human, we're the army of Eros, those ironic points of light, yeah.
Their costumes were definitely much better. I like that Viking hat.
But that's the thing. is there's so much scope for imagination and stuff, but there's very little scope for all this boring stuff. If you're doing BECS and carbon capture, and it's, you know, these rollouts, it's really like root canal therapy. It's like school, and so anybody that says like, hey, forget school, let's party, man, they got a much easier ride. So at the moment, people are not thinking of breaking out, but if, you know, basically it's so much easier on Team Human to appeal to humans and fight for humanity and life. So we're fighting for life. They're fighting for death. They're fighting. All they do is take living things, make dead things out of them, so that they can market them. But
Yeah,
we're fighting for life, and it's messy, and it's interesting, and it's life.
Yeah, it's almost like every time you hear the word manage, run away.
Yeah. So manage, manual, all of those things, they come from the etymology of manu, which is man, and it's what's implied is, I believe, is the hand. So let me just have a look at the. I think the Sanskrit is quite an interesting and revealing thing for this, but let me just have a look. So manage. Okay. Okay. So it's to handle, train, or direct, and then in brackets a horse. So again, I think the first people to actually domesticate the horse was the Aryans. They invented the wheel. They certainly rode horses, and so you can see that a lot of the Tropilian people and those kind of guys, I think that they get the word horse as a loan word from the Aryans. And so basically you're talking about this control narrative. So, but I think that's why manger is because it's the handling of a horse. Yeah. So it's the handling and training of a horse, manage. So, but let's see what the Sanskrit root is. Yeah. So from the Pi root, man, hand. Yeah. So there you go. I don't bullshit you all the time. I was right. The Sanskrit root is hand. So and particularly in the sense of grasping. So it's purely from our alien cortex, and basically the alien cortex and your right hand is intimately related, right? There's in the crossover, the sciatic crossover, and the hemispherical crossover to the right hand is this left brain controls the right hand. And so we get things like, hey, I can't grasp what you're saying, stuff like that. All of those come from the idea that the left brain alien cortex is trying to grab what you're saying. So, you're saying stuff and I'm trying to grab it out of there. But the idea of managing is grab, hold, control. And especially digital, because of the, digitalis is fingers, and digits come from that. So by the time you get to numeracy and letters and stuff, they're digital. So you can clearly see that anything to do with manage is to do with the left brain. So a managed extinction is what we're headed for, and these guys are calculating with their alien cortex, and the narrative is control.
I just had an image come to my mind when you're talking about that. So when you said digits and hands and alien cortex, I've pictured puppet strings come from the fingers and then like a puppet appear. Like, holy shit.
Yeah, marionettes. Yeah, so the whole narrative of like Jordan Peterson gets wax lyrical about Pinocchio, but the Pinocchio has a lot of these elements. Walt Disney wasn't a dummy, that's for sure, and but the idea that that you can hold and grasp something and then steer it. So steering as well. Steering also comes from I can't remember the Proto-Indo-European root for steer, but I think it comes from Norwegian, from like star. It comes as like starboard. It's from ships, right? So the idea is that you take a rudder, and steering, and then why we have words like steerage and stuff like that with nautical terminology, is the idea of using steering. So if you look at the cyberneticists, and cyber is these guys are all transhumanist cyberneticists. Cyber comes from kyber, which means to steer. So kyber is the Greek word for somebody on the rudder, the helm. Not a helm, basically the rudder board. So kyber, it means to steer, and so cybernautics is the art of steering. So what these people are doing is managing steering and using the right hand to do it. And so that's the essence of what I've been trying to say all along, is going back to the Jordan Peterson, Stephen Fry conversation and what I was saying with the helicopter is that if you try and do that kind of management on a complex system, you'll overcorrect. So the big problem with steering is, I mean, you can steer a ship because it's kind of simple, but anything more than that is, if you try and manage in that way, you lose all the nuance, and everything is a sensitive dependence on previous things. So let me elaborate on that in case hopefully you're not going to sleep already. But all these systems, the complex systems that we're talking about, the Earth system, even if you're talking about medicine and the human body, they're all Kantian holes. And if you remember a Kantian hole, you remember what a Kantian hole is, class? Anybody?
Please refresh our memories. Not that we ever got it. Not that I ever got it.
A Kantian hole is, so Immanuel Kant, excuse the name, said that the kind of holes the Kantian holes is that the parts exist for the whole, and the whole exists to serve the parts. So it's kind of like Hobbes' Leviathan is the state is there to serve the people, and all the people are there to serve the state. So then in the human body, you say, well, what are each one of these organs? So organs is a word that comes from like organize, and what it means is to put into separate parts, just like an organ. It comes from the word for, I think, from the musical thing. And what it means is we have organs because the organ is serving some function in the human body, like the heart is pumping blood, the stomach is digesting, and the brain is directing. But the idea is that the human body then runs around eating and excreting and procreating and serving each one of the organs. So the body breathes, and then that allows the heart to get oxygen and pump the oxygen around. So every one of the organs is serving the greater good. So the whole is not antagonistic towards the parts, and the parts are not antagonistic towards the whole. And that means that they have a symbiotic kind of relationship. I think what Kant missed, and what I try and communicate to you, is that the Kantian hole never stops. There's no boundary. So I don't think Kant got the idea that, there isn't this little frame where you have a Kantian hole, and the parts serve the whole serves the parts, and it's just like the human body. You can always go down and say, well, that's on that scale, but I can go down and look at one of the cells in your heart, and it's like a city in there. If you look at all these wonderful animations and that they have of what goes on at the biomolecular level, then it's wonderful shit going on. But each one of these biomolecular things, they also are serving the cell, and the cell is serving them by acting as a membrane and doing all this kind of stuff. And an electropotential and stuff. So each one of the cells is like a miniature city. Then it's part of an organ. So it's, a Kantian hole at that level. Then there's a Kantian hole at the human body level. Then as a human, then you're part of society, and you serve your tribe and your society, and your society serves you and takes care of you. And then you can scale that up, to the whole biosphere. And so it's a nested Kantian hole, and I think that that's something which people miss. But see, okay, so once you realize that you have that kind of Kantian hole, then the problem of trying to manage it is in losing the resolution, because in those kind of systems, you can telescope all the way down. It's kind of fractal. In fact, it's very fractal. And so it means that you can telescope down these scales. And so what's happening, say, at the biomolecular scale is then emerging at the cellular scale, and then it's emerging at the physiological scale of the size of your body. But you see, there isn't a breaking point where you can actually say, okay, now this is the boundary of where I manage. So if you manage something like, say, a state, or say a population, like Klaus Schwab wants to do with electronics and AI, is you have to cut it off somewhere. You can't go down to the state is not going to manage you to a biomolecular level. They're going to run and stuff, and they're going to say, it's, say, One Health and the One Health doctrine. They're saying, well, all of these are related, but they see them as related as like, okay, you have diabetes. So therefore, they're going to treat the diabetes. Now, the diabetes doesn't exist on its own, like they think. The diabetes is intricately connected to all these other parts, and so it's a long story of the breakdown to diabetes. It might have social implications, it might have where you live environmentally, but they can't keep track of all of that. Nature doesn't struggle, because nature's like a big computer that goes down to infinite scales, maybe the Planck length. But you see, they have to say, well, we'll start here, that there's a cutoff. And so then you'd say, okay, your diabetes is here, it's to do with human physiology, we'll compartmentalize that in healthcare. But it's like, as soon as you go into healthcare, then they'll start you on this treatment for your diabetes or whatever you've got. And then you will soon find out that it's the treatment you get, or the course of the disease, is intimately related to how much you can afford. Even if it's a social system like in the, a healthcare system like in the UK. But it's more likely that those social things will break down and become privatized. That's coming, by the way. So what these guys are going to be doing is they're going to be managing your diabetes, ignoring the fact that it's intimately related to the finance system. So, how the care you get, whether you manage the diabetes, will be, the genetic therapies you can get will come with a price tag. And so if you can afford better healthcare for your diabetes, then basically you will be more able, you'll be more employable, you'll be richer. But if you get on the wrong side of that, then you'll find that your finances get wrecked because of your diabetes. You wind up in a poverty trap, and you're on a downward spiral. And then they're going to try and manage that in a different compartment. So while you've got diabetes that's related to the fact that you have hypertension because you can't get employed, and then your health is deteriorating because you've been kicked out of your housing, then it's basically, to them, those are all separate problems. And so, but they're not separate problems, they're all intimately related. And then eventually they'll categorize you, you'll fall under some problem as the irredeemable or undeserving poor. That's where, like, the Victorians got to. They said you have the deserving poor and the undeserving poor. Now,
And
these guys all get exactly the same place.
And didn't Hitler in the Nazi regime eventually start calling like people that weren't like non-useful eaters or something, or was that like a myth?
No, they did. They educated the population. They justified eugenics in Nazi Germany by having posters and movie reels and a lot of propaganda to say that what managed humanity was very important for the health of everybody. So the Nazis, in effect, had a One Health doctrine. What they were doing was they put up posters saying, like, this guy is a neurodegenerate, he's got no hope, he's going to be kept under state care for 30 years. It will cost 64,000 Reichsmark. They have posters like this. And what they're saying in the poster is like, here's a healthy, young, like, blood and soil Aryan Hitler Jugend guy. And he said, think what 64,000 Deutschmarks could do for this guy's life. So, like, is it right to deprive this young, healthy kid by this guy who's a vegetable? And so it's a very compelling argument. And so, that's where we'll get to. We're already there, in fact. And so the reason why this is not good is it's not good from so many angles, but it's not good even from the angle where they're coming from. And that's the idea of population management and essentially breeding humans. So they're thinking in terms of, like, cattle breeding. But if you look at breeders, the cattle that they're breeding, for the reason that I'm saying, is that's the misunderstanding of the Kantian Hole leads to entropy. If you try and interfere with the Kantian Hole, you'll increase entropy, and that's what they find with, say, breeders. So breeders, you can make a cow bigger, or you can make, a prize steer, or award-winning pig or something like that. But the more you do that, the more you struggle with deleterious effects. So you need diversity. You see, all those line breeding things, you get a fantastic cow or something, but that cow's going to really struggle in terms of its defense against disease. It's like German shepherds. They've been line bred and inbred too much, and they all have crap hips. But you see, the dilemma is that they can get the German shepherd and then say, well, we're going to crossbreed with some mongrel. It needs a bit of, it definitely needs a bit of new blood. But then the new blood is going to cost the ideal of a German shepherd. So it's not going to be a prize-winning dog anymore. It's not going to be a purebred dog. And so the same applies with humans. Is they eventually turn into these effete Eloi, very delicate, very domesticated. And the other thing is, as you go with this, domestication is not good for plants or animals or humans. So domestication itself is making, testes shrink. It's making them less fit, so less viable. Eventually you're not a viable human being if you've been domesticated too long. It's like the camels in Egypt or in Arabia that have been under domestication for so long that they can't breed anymore. They rely on humans to basically, some little Arab camel herder has to come and get the camel's penis and shove it in because they're impotent. They've been too domesticated. So basically, they're degenerating more and more. If there wasn't a human to actually intervene for the generation, they wouldn't be able to procreate. So and humans are the same. The reason why we're getting more and more Viagra and stuff is because we're getting more and more domesticated. We're literally turning into limp dick, ballless, we're not able to reproduce outside of a petri dish. So it's like, this is the price of domestication. Our brain's getting smaller, we're getting more timid, our immune system's getting fucked, and we're basically getting more and more of these allergies and all these kind of secondary effects of, and it's domestication, and so couple that with inbreeding, we're fucked.
Yeah, and then on top of that, I think the authoritarian socialization fucks with the genetic diversity too. I'll use dogs and wolves as an example, because I've worked with both, and a wolf will not recognize your speech at all, like your alien cortex speech. They don't respond at all, even if you give them a name. Dogs are like, have evolved with us, so they're more keen to like recognize our speech than they are like their own senses. And so I think that might be another factor that's going on with civilized humans and their authoritarian leaders is the dog wagging its tail, or the tail, which one are we, the tail or the dog? Yeah.
Well,
it's
that was
fucking our brains up.
That thing that you posted about the plague dogs,
Oh yeah, cowslips Warren. Yeah, the Warren of the Shining Wire. Those rabbits, they were getting fed and they're being meat for the humans, getting caught in those snares.
Yeah, but that was Watership Down, but the
you're talking about plague
novel,
dogs.
The Plague Dogs, was about the cost of domestication. Is that when they had to be wild, then they didn't shed,
Yeah, I read those books in my formative years. Yeah, and I saw that video. I'm like, this is perfect, and I put that up there. Yeah, yeah, that's just like those dogs. That's us. With the imagery of Ralph being tortured in the drowning chamber. That's like us in school, and then they send us out on this apocalyptic rat race. It really makes that clear. I think Richard Adams really knew what the hell was happening with our society.
Yeah, but it's so much worse than even these dark pictures. I mean, just think of Africa, what's going to happen to Africans and stuff. Africans, I can't even begin to contemplate what they're going to do to Africans. Even African Americans, they're going to try and wipe them out. And so, but I mean, there's so many programs that have been since apartheid, ethnic weapons. And it's like they never stopped. In Israel, still building ethnic weapons. So it's like the research on ethnic weapons has been going on since 1945. So I'm pretty sure there's no, black Africans doing bioweapons research. So it's pretty obvious who's on the receiving end. And so it's basically, you just do an IQ test, and the IQ test is a test for the alien cortex. And if you score really well on an IQ test, you're in. And if you don't, you're surplus, man, to requirements. You see, they can do a genocide very, very slowly. They don't have to round people up and put them in cattle cars. In effect, what's been going on in America with the prison system is a large, long, drawn-out eugenics program. So if you don't get conjugal rights in prison, the high incarceration rates for people of color is to take them out of circulation. It's really to sterilize them. And so that just goes on and on, it just works into the system, because if you somebody of color, you don't make it in the social credit scoring system, you'll have to get a job in a less desirable industry. You'll have to live in a less desirable part of town, and those will be polluted. They'll be polluted with things that will affect your fertility, and so it's a long breeding program. But I mean, that's how it would be naturally if you just let the system run on. We'll lose diversity. But and ironically, wokeism is costing diversity. So wokeism as well is a backfire, because it's difficult to see, but you can see it in just the fact that wokeism is paralyzing. So you can't say something like, okay, China, you can easily find an article that says, saying, the Wuhan lab theory is racist. So it's you can't say anything against something which might be potentially an ethnic weapon. So if you were released an ethnic weapon, you know, especially if it came from somewhere like China, you can't say anything about it or say that it's obviously an ethnic weapon, because that's racist. And so it puts a chill on it. And we've just seen how, we've all the censorship. So you can't say the obvious, that it was a lab leak. Freaking obvious, it's a lab leak. But you can't say that because it's offensive and it's not woke, and so wokeism itself is aiding this dark future, and it's going to backfire so much on the people that they're trying to be, have justice for. Like Africans wokeism is going to cost Africa brutally, because under the strength of wokeism, you can release an ethnic weapon. Ethnic bioweapons are coming. They're coming. They might have been released already. I told you the story of HIV/AIDS. So HIV/AIDS, according to all the rumors, and I never found a rumor that wasn't borne out later, but in the South African Air Force, the rumor was that we created AIDS in a lab and released it in the Congo. And basically, you tell that to anybody at the time as, oh, conspiracy theorist, blah, 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 blah. It turned out to be true. Nowadays, you have to say, oh, HIV came from chimps in the Congo. It's like, no, it didn't. It came from baboons in South Africa in the River Plate lab. But you're not allowed to make that connection because it's ethnic bioweapon, is really dark stuff. But it's all there. It's just nobody wants to look. So if they did HIV, if South Africa deliberately released HIV, that's in the 80s. You know how much further they've got along that road with CRISPR and the gene drive? I mean, what planet are you on that you think there's 7.8 billion people, and you really think there aren't guys in white lab coats that, go home at night thinking up how you could do an ethnic bioweapon? It's like, I'll give you the guy's name and address if you want. It's like, and how it needs a handful. It needs a handful of guys to be doing this stuff and thinking this way. So it's inconceivable that it isn't happening, but you're not allowed to say it because then you're a conspiracy theorist. And why mustn't you be a conspiracy theorist? Because it's going to turn into racism, and Asian people are going to get beaten up on the streets. And they're like, well, a lot worse is coming down the pike, and let's just stop this woke bullshit.
Yeah, with those ethnic bioweapons, it's like the cancer is trying to thoroughly make sure that the rest of the uncancered, biomass of humanity is, converted to this civilization slave cancer.
Yeah, so they in South Africa they did profiling to try and they did decades of research into try and finding the genetic differences. It was in the early days before the genome was sequenced and stuff. But they did extensive research into, what's the genetic differences between black and white people, so they could wipe out the black people. They did it in concert with Israel. Israel wanted that research so they could wipe out Arabs. And it's like, it's all there. It's all documented. You never see that in The Guardian. Why? Because it's Israel. Nobody can say anything about Israel because why? Woke. It's like, guys, gotta stop this shit, man. There's really evil stuff coming down the pike. And, the fact you're not allowed to talk about it or you get canceled or something is like, wow, man. You're not even allowed to explain the Holocaust, you can go to jail for explaining the truth about what happened in the Holocaust. And if people don't understand the Holocaust, they're going to walk right into it. They're going to walk right into it again. So, but, well, we better round off there. But the good news is that you can explain all this to people if you get them in alternate reality game or cult. So, look how easy it is to spread any kind of information you want in something like QAnon. So I hope that eventually we can get started on this, but it's like,
yeah, it's creating the circumstances where people are going to ask the question why, and once that starts happening, things unravel pretty quick. Because if you take any of the belief systems of civilization and the progress motive and all that, and you ask why, it quickly falls apart. It quickly falls apart because there's no justification that isn't ideological. It's all pure ideology, like Slavoj Zizek says. Pure ideology.
Yeah, but it's like, like going to the moon. Like, but we went to the moon. So yeah.
Another question
Why? And then it's like, well, we're gonna discover new things. And like, what did we discover? Fuck all. It's like, oh no, but it's a stepping stone to Mars. And then what? Well, then to the stars. No, rubbish. It's not ways you're going from Mars to Alpha Centauri. It's like you're talking shit, absolute shit.
Another thing that we can take into account there too is like, okay, how much of the biodiversity of the planet did we destroy to go to the moon?
Yeah, it's the same thing. Like, oh well, Elon Musk is preparing, saying we have to be cyborgs to compete with transhumanists and AI, and then we have to go to Mars to be a multi-planet species. And it's like, dude, wait, it's not going to do you any good because you're taking the alien cortex with you to Mars. So you're not addressing the problem by going to Mars. So the only reason why you need to go to Mars is not because there's a comet coming. It's because we fucked this planet up.
Yeah, and I think the whole freaking space fetish that people have is probably just the alien cortex's desire to escape life manifesting itself in our reality. Like it wants to fly away from the mortality of Earth and the fact that we grew out of this planet and we're going to go back into it at the end. And you just got to get used to that idea because you can't escape it. The fantasy needs to end. It really does.
Yeah, it'll end the game. It's the game of life with Kali or with Gaia, and it'll end the game for keeps if you try and win it outright. So they wanted to, they see what they're craving, like you say, is death. That going to Mars and the whole thing about it, when Elon Musk talks about it, it's a one-way trip. And the idea is that you can have a sterile perfection. It's a simpler world where we can start over. And all of it is what they're really doing is romancing death. They really want to die. Because life is messy, life is unpredictable, life is complicated. And so that's what they don't like. They want something sterile and dry and stuff. And it's like, yeah, it's coffin. It's a mausoleum. It's all they're building on Mars.
And it's like the point of a game isn't to win, it's to have fun. Like I've noticed that if I'm like playing a game with somebody and it's like getting really sweaty, try hard, people are trying to win, it's like I don't want to play then. This ain't fun. That attitude, that sucks.
Yeah.
I want to just have fun.
Yeah, well, it's about making love. It's basically making love to the universe, but it's kind of they don't want to make love. They want to win.
Yeah, and another thing I saw recently, one of my friends showed me this cartoon show, and there's this guy doing this alchemy to do perfect knowledge, and he's had these figures come into his life, like this other master alchemist lady, this vampire aristocrat, and at the end when he's like casting the spell to open like this labyrinth that has all the perfect knowledge that he desires, the vampire aristocrat reveals himself to be Death, and Death turned into all these forms that was guiding him all the way throughout this process. And he's like, okay, now you're going to kill all life on the planet, and you're going to do it for me because I can't reach into hell. Only humans can. And so
Yeah,
that just blew my fucking mind.
it's like that. It's like that. But you see, we have to learn how to tell the story, and I think tell it on a bigger scale. Um, but there are lots of other people doing it. We just need to connect with them, you know.
It's hard. We gotta figure out how to retell the old stories. One of my favorites is that story of Ragnarok and Odin. He gets that prophecy, of Ragnarok, and everything he does guarantees it'll happen. Like, he's scared of the big wolf Fenrir, and they trick him into getting bound, and that causes the wolf to get angry, and then he eats Odin's world. And I think that's like a metaphor for nature, because nature's gonna eat us eventually. Odin didn't want to get eaten. And so by tricking the giant wolf and binding him, he guarantees that happens. And so
Yeah, that's
we
full
got to
of
stop.
ancient stories. I mean,
Yeah, it's like,
that all the way back to Gilgamesh is basically it's the story of the meeting in Samara. Is everything you do to escape death defines how you meet it.
I would like to thank you for explaining all that about the gargantuan system changes that everybody like the eugenicists and the transhuman globalists are trying to do. And the wishful thinking part of me says that, based on your system's background, there are so many points of failure that they have so much hubris that they think they can manage all these and make them happen. And my wishful thinking part says they're going to fail. They'll have points of failure. The bad thing is that regardless of whether they fail or succeed, the consequences upon us and upon the planet are dire.
Yeah.
So
So it was a great shame, but in the 80s there was a big surge of interest in chaos theory, and a guy called Lorenzen that developed the butterfly effect. And there are a lot of things that it was just getting interesting when they got into stable and unstable systems and butterfly effects and stuff. So chaos was getting really interesting when everybody kind of forgot it, and then got sidetracked by Jobs and all the futurologists, like Gates and all the internet. But you see, where those guys were going with chaos was showing that the system was very fragile, because it's obvious once you realize that there's a butterfly effect, and a butterfly flapping its wings somewhere in Mexico can cause a hurricane somewhere down the road in China much later, is then how do you manage that system? You have to take care of every single butterfly, and so you can't do it. But nature doesn't struggle. Nature happily has butterflies causing hurricanes, and the hurricanes, renew mangrove swamps, and nature is pulling out all this miracle out of the law of large numbers. So if you have large enough numbers of butterflies, they all cancel each other out, like the rats on the glass, just doing their own thing. So if you have lots of random sources doing their own thing, you get these emergent effects. And that's why it all works from the point of view of a Kantian hole. But if you take out the random things and you try and go for what I was saying before, the center of the bell curve, so you just get repeatable evidence-based metrics that you run off, basically those metrics are very, very coarse, and they don't go down to the butterflies. So butterflies are going to get you all the time. And then you have to double down on your control, in which case you're getting into the situation with the helicopter, or, over-tipping the raft, the Perspex raft, because everybody overcorrects left and right. So the thing is to just let go. Just let go. Again, it's the grasping thing. So that grasp, manage, is you have to say, you've got to get those white knuckles off the control lever. You've got to do it. But I tell you, these guys like Bill Gates, they're too far gone. You've got to kill them. I swear you've got to kill them. I mean it. They cannot take their hand off. They literally cannot do it. But basically, if a guy is so far gone like that, basically, and he has so much control, so many billions, right? There is no way you will convince him to let go. I absolutely do not believe it. Those guys literally have to die. They are physically incapable. They are psychotic. They have their hand on their control. And they are far too powerful. They're far too powerful from the point of view of what they can do in terms of geoengineering and all the stuff they're doing in terms of social engineering. They're engineering everything. But you will not stop those guys engineering, because there's only one cure.
Yeah, it's like that. It's like that cartoon my friend showed me with death. Like once they're that high and they have that power, all they can do is serve death. That's all they can
Yeah.
do. Once they're
Yeah.
that powerful, that's all. That's they're. It's arguable that they're even human beings at that point anymore.
They're not.
No.
See, this is what I'm saying, and then people hate it. But like they downvote me. I can get downvoted to 0 just by putting something up. Now, I'm saying these people are not human. It's not murder if you eliminate these guys, because they really aren't human. You're not killing a human being. These people have gone over into they're behaving like automatons. So you shouldn't, if anybody murdered these guys, they shouldn't be prosecuted for murder, because all you're doing is like unplugging a machine. They are becoming so mechanistic and so machine-like that they should have a new category of eliminating them. It's a crime.
Yeah, it's that dictator speech from Charlie Chaplin, men with machine hearts and machine minds. Yeah.
Yeah, the great dictator thing. Yeah, you see, Charlie Chaplin had a big heart, so he saw it. But you see, everybody's too nice. All these domesticates are too nice. They think you can rationalize with these people. They think you can, reform psychopaths and stuff. But you can't. These people can't help themselves. So, yeah, and also they kind of tipped over themselves. So they so hubristic, they're so narcissistic that they don't see that they have a problem. See, the guys like Epstein and Gates, they're very similar. And I bet you Gates has been doing some very pedophilia things. I bet you Melinda Gates didn't just divorce him because he was friends with Epstein. It's basically, I'm pretty sure that basically Epstein was blackmailing him for some pretty nasty shit. And I'm pretty sure Melinda's divorcing Bill because he's probably kinky as fuck when it comes to the bedroom. And I bet you there's probably underage boys or girls involved. But the thing about those guys is that they don't believe they have a problem, right? Because they can always point to the world and say, I'm a multi-billionaire, I'm the peak of success. And any psychiatrist or psychotherapist or anything would say, no, those guys are the picture of mental health because they're successful in our society. How can you say that about a guy who's as one of the richest people in the world? It's like he's the very definition of a successful human being. You say, no, it's not actually. He's so far gone that he doesn't realize he's a very, very sick person, and the rest of the world doesn't accept that because we idolize money. And so, if to say that Musk and Gates and Epstein and Harvey Weinstein and the Sackler family and the Koch brothers and all these psychopaths is to say that those guys are sick means that we have to reject our entire ideology of capitalism and saying that you can only become super rich if you're mentally ill. And no one wants to say that because they all want to be they all want to be rich. So then they don't accept that only mentally ill people can be.
I have a question. I have a question. When I saw Bright Green Lies, they talked about agriculture and they said agriculture destroys everything, everything. So why didn't people years ago when agriculture started, why didn't they stop that from happening and have an alternative?
So the reason I think is from looking at everything, the story from Göbekli Tepe on, is that you have it becomes a trap. So what really stops people is you get warlords. So what you can see after Göbekli Tepe, you can see that there's a priesthood, but there isn't yet a social hierarchy. Then you get to Çatalhöyük, that's 2,000 years later, it's about 8,000 years ago. Çatalhöyük then is still very egalitarian, but they have death anxiety. Then by the time you get to Sumer, that's 5,000 years ago, if you look at Uruk, Ur and stuff like that, they have strongmen. So by that stage you have kings. And what the kings are is they emerge out of the marketplaces. So what all these towns are is they're market squares. And you get bullies that control and tax the market. So those guys become the kings, and then they have armies. The armies are just basically security guards for the market and for extorting tax out of the market. But in other words, you can just see it in a nightclub, right? If you have any guy who like deals with drugs and stuff. So the drugs in these ancient times are the market. So it's really sex and stuff. The guys are going into the market. They're going into trade. They're trading flint and stuff like that, obsidian, and they're getting sex a lot of the time as the trade. And so then that's the marketplace. That's the drugs that you'd see like a drug kingpin in, say, New York. Then that drug kingpin, as soon as he's got loads of money, he starts being a pimp and he opens a nightclub. And the nightclub is a place for him to sell drugs. It's a place, where people come to have a good time. They get booze, they get sex. So it's a big attractor. And it's a marketplace. A nightclub is a big meat market. What really is on sale is drugs and sex.
Feedback loop, right? It's like a feedback loop.
Yeah. And so as soon as people flock there, they get addicted. Basically, it's a reptilian brain. The bright lights, and they have a good time, and that's making the warlord richer. So he has to have security at the door, and that's what they all have. They start to have city walls. If you look at the Epic of Gilgamesh, Gilgamesh is the first king. He's supposed to be the first king, and the very first bit of the first thing, where they talk about Ur and the first city, they wax on and on about how thick the walls are and how huge the walls are and how big the walls are. You think, why do they go on about how proud they are about the walls? And it's because it's a nightclub. Because if you have thick walls, this is even before they have armies. No, there are no other armies to come and attack them, but they've got big walls. Why? The same reason the nightclub has a door and a bouncer is they have to tax everybody, entrance fee on the way in, the whole thing. And that's what's going on. So you take a nightclub, you'll see that like Scarface just gets richer and richer and bigger. And then what happens is they denude the local surroundings. So they can't, hunter-gathering stops, and they start agriculture because they desperately need to feed the party. They need to make beer, for starters, because if you get a concentration of people over 5,000 people in one place, you've got real problems with sanitation. And the only way you can get fresh water supply, you can't go too far. You can't go 5 miles to get your water. So they either have to have irrigation or they have to have beer. And they mainly go for beer because it's more of a party, it's more alcoholic. But then you have to get people down mines, and you have to get people in the fields but what they're doing is they're keeping the party going. So they're not voluntary. The guys that go down the mines are criminals, and the guys that work on the fields are guys that have no options. They're slaves. And so that's the only way you get a city going, and then it becomes a feedback loop and a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what it's doing to the environment is that, anything you can hunt and gather and scavenge, and that gets denuded. As soon as you start farming, then you have to build canals and stuff because you deforested them, you killed the earth. So then you start salt bleaching. As soon as you start irrigation, you get salt bleaching. So you won't be able to do much farming for very long, and you have to move the field on, and then it hopefully, you know, it lies fallow and regenerates. But the city's growing faster than the agriculture. So the agriculture has to move out and take up more and more of the natural environment. So it's kind of like a fire. You're eating up the natural environment and you're polluting downstream. But you're trapped because all those people then, you know, basically, even if they left the city, they're kind of surrounded by deserts. That's the problem we're in today. We're in the last stages of this process. And it's like everybody says, oh, well, I'm going to go off grid and stuff. There's no off grid. You're in the same problem the guys had in Sumer, the deserts on either side. You see, civilization starts in those regions because the guys have no option. They've, like in Egypt, they've got desert on the left and the right. So you can't just say like, oh, fuck the Pharaoh, I'm not going to be whipped anymore. I'm going to run off into the desert. Well, they'll let you go because you're not going to survive. So we're in exactly the same situation. So all these kids saying, I'm going to go off grid is saying like, no, you're not. You don't understand the story. You go back to Sumer, you're going to say, I'm going to run off into the desert. But people are literally going to do that. You're not, the kids today think they're going to go off into an eco village somewhere, but they're not. They're going to wind up in a desert because you don't get plum land, which is agriculturally fertile and stuff, and to do your eco village on. You wind up like the San people. So the San people that I keep on talking about, they now consider desert dwellers that live in Namibia and the Okavango swamp. They're just hanging on by their fingernails there. But they're not desert people. They started out in the Cape and all the wineland and perfect Eden. Now they grow the best agricultural land in Ceres and stuff was all their land. They lived in paradise. Now they're living in the desert because there's nothing left. And the same applies to us. You can't get out of the system. Now you have to stay and fight. And fight means you have to take down the warlords and destroy the market. Which is coming, by the way. They're destroying it themselves.
Yeah,
the acceleration is.
Yeah, the market is like the dark heart of the crucible that all life is being sacrificed on.
Yeah, it's all trade. It's commerce. It's commerce that did it.
I made up that slogan a few months ago. It's sharing is caring, trading is betraying. You should put that on a t-shirt.
Yeah. But you see, there again, you can only trade with people you can only share with people you know. I mean, you can share with a stranger, but not thousands. You can't go down to Walmart and start sharing. We better end off soon, but the people that try and start communes, particularly like anarchists, what they find is they can't get it off the ground because you've known people, even in Crete, that start a co-op, and then there's one guy who has more money and more resources, and he can actually set up the co-op. And then all the other guys come in and they will like help themselves to the fruit or whatever. And you say like, no, you can't do that. You have to pay for that. And you say, what are you, a capitalist? Is they're like, come on, we set this co-op up so we could just share. And say, you can't share in that way. You can't like bring your pals, say, hey, there's free food down in the co-op, and then they raid it.
Yeah,
So,
that only works if you have a habitat to hunt and gather from, unfortunately. You can't be connected to the market, it'll corrupt you.
Yeah. And then the guys you bring in are toxic with civilization. So they have all these ideas about money and exchange, and so the guys fight. And so you can't do a co-op like that. It just never works because, as I said, you've got to get the plantation out of the slave. You can't just take the slave out of the plantation. But on that happy note, to get the slave out, you need a new narrative, right? You can't sell them on some paradise in the sky. That's their trick. That's the enemy's trick. Our trick is to remind people of their humanity, so that basically you show them that they're tigers and not sheep, and you get them in touch with their wolf, their inner wolf.
Yes.
What's left of it. But anyway, it's only the wolves that survive. So hopefully you've got a zest for life and you want to survive. But rather be evil than be good if it means that you don't survive. There are too many people out there that are prepared to roll over and die and be good. And not enough people that say, like, fuck being good. You need to survive.
Yeah, that good and evil reminds me of something. So I was in college for a little bit, and I was in a philosophy class in ethics, and they wanted me to write. They wanted you to write like on an ethical issue, and the one I was thinking about was like animal rights. But what I ended up realizing is the same thing we've been talking about here is the frame, but I didn't realize it in a sophisticated way. I sat there thinking like, anything I write is going to be inadequate because it's always going to depend on your circumstances. And you're never going to know what those circumstances would be. So I really struggled even trying to write something. So what I ended up writing was, it was it was bad. It was clumsy because I was only like 20. But basically, I was arguing that we should remove all arbitrary constraints. It wasn't a good paper at all. But yeah, I realized that like that young that I couldn't sit there and create a ethical philosophy that everyone can follow because it's always going to depend on what you're faced with.
Yeah, many people came to this conclusion, like Aleister Crowley and Telema, and those guys say, do what thou wilt, this is the only law. And what they're saying is that you don't, most of the domesticates think, what? That's a terrible philosophy. You're just going to be a complete cunt and just walk around being antisocial? Say, no, that's not what he said. So do what thou wilt, that's the only law. And so, but what's implied in there is the goodness of humanity, that you only really want to do good things.
Exactly.
Everybody has this prison mentality that they think everybody's going to be evil if they just do what they want. Say, no, you only do evil things because you're in a traumatic situation that's been imposed on you. So people are doing structural violence to you, of course you feel like reacting. But that's not normal. We had a normal society where nobody incarcerated anybody else and everybody was free, everybody would be decent. It's human nature to be decent. But yeah, anyway, so let's end it on that, because we need to at least tell our story in our neck of the woods that humans are decent. You have to be part of that decency means that you have to occasionally do a bit of therapy for psychopaths. I mean, they exist. Sorry, it means there's work to do. But once that's done, then you can get back to being human, and humans are nice.
Yeah, it's like peeling off the armor. I love that. I read that book, Against History, Against Leviathan, and he uses the metaphor of ripping off the Leviathanic armor to free the human being within. I love that. That's such a good metaphor for it. And he says that ripping that armor off is really painful, though.
Yeah, for sure it is. But somewhere along the line, everybody has to take a lot of pain, and it's just, I feel that we should make them take more of it than us. But there's plenty of pain to go around coming up. But I think that's, yeah. We must talk about that. There's especially the power of the forgotten history of how close anarchists got to in the 19th century to actually solving this problem. They don't teach you that. Maybe you should go over that.
Yeah, that'd be a good one, a good idea to go over that too, because like even I can't imagine like how I would, go about reorganizing. Like I obviously know the system is wrong and I don't want anything to do with money, but like I don't know how to build a society. We've been slaves, Yeah.
Oh, no, you don't have to build a society. You just have to get rid of the prison yard. Yeah. The prison, they came close to doing it in the 19th century. We must talk about it because people believe that we're so helpless and stuff, and it's like, yeah, you just have to have a bit of gumption. Anarchists come that close, baby, that close.
Yeah, the thing is like we feel people feel weak and helpless because we're afraid to learn things now because of the trauma. But
Yeah,
you if you learn that learning is a lifelong process, you just feel powerful all the way as you learn
yeah.
new things and new skills. Yeah.
Let's also talk about gathering power and stuff too. So, all right. Well, so let's just leave it there and just give
All
up
right.
the whole thing. And yeah, and just remind anybody that in case the state is working up a prosecution here or something, like this is all metaphorical. We're talking about an alternate reality game. It's
Yeah.
role playing, just completely.
We're
Nobody go out and do anything that basically your grandmother wouldn't approve of. Okay.
we're putting together a script for a book. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
We're gonna
Yeah.
write a
Yeah,
book.
exactly.
Okay. All right. And based on that, we might as well give it up to the universe anyway. And just fall deeply still. Let out a big, long breath. Take in a nice, big lungful of air. Let it out again. Just fall deeply still. So let's make no more claims on this. Let's not try and grasp anything. Let's just let go with the words Om Paramatmane Namah. Good. Well, that was long. Sorry about that. But anyway.
Oh no, that wasn't your fault. We were all chipping in
Yeah, we're all
contributing to the time. So so don't blame yourself for that. This was a collective
Yes,
this
a group.
time.
Okay, as long as nobody fainted.
We
Okay,
were
cheers,
all
everybody.
awake. Thank you.
Have a nice week.
Till
You
next week.
too.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Everybody,
Take
bye.
care.